I said I was going to make another review video because I'd finished a couple books. And this one is Forensic Files Now by Rebecca Reisner. This one was. It's kind of a weird thing because she's specifically focusing on the show Forensic Files, which is sort of the OG of the true crime TV shows that have been around. That Forensic Files has been around for years. I saw it when I was in France. They were showing it over there. There's like a fascination in Europe with American crimes, not because they don't have crime in Europe, but because we cover it differently in the United States. We have a lot of almost reality TV situations around our crime to some extent. And because of that, other countries are sort of fascinated because their crimes aren't covered the same way. Their crimes are not published, and you're hearing everything about how the investigation's going and different things like that. So the United States, our crimes are kind of perceived differently in other countries. So Forensic Files is shown all around the world. Reisner makes this book. She goes into updates about about 40 different crimes that were on Forensic Files, and talks about where the people involved are now, what happened to the criminals, that sort of a thing. Are they having appeals? All that sort of a deal, which was interesting, and it is an interesting thing to kind of, after you see a show, pursue what has happened since then. We kind of almost get into that weird territory that, like I said, I'm into true crime, but I'm very particular with how it's presented. There's a podcast called My Favorite Murder, which I have never listened to, mainly because the title has put me off a little bit on that show. Because when we're presenting crime, and maybe they explain why they call it this, I don't know. It's just the title, just looking at it from a distance. When you explain your crime in almost a reality TV sort of a way, and she mentioned several times, this was my favorite murder on Forensic Files, this was my favorite such, you're getting into a weird area of disconnect with the fact that this is a crime. People's lives have been ruined. People's lives have been taken more often than not. That the people involved in this who have done these things are horrible. And it almost puts it into this kind of reality TV category. And I think that's, my thinking would be that is where the problem with the true crime community is coming. We have this overlap with reality TV, not separating the fact that reality TV is scripted, it's trashy for the sake of trashy, it's not real things at all, and true crime is. True crime isn't scripted. It is real things happening to real people, and I think we kind of get those two confused, and it ends up in this kind of ugly, weird area where we are looking at true crime as sort of a reality television sort of a thing. The books are a little bit different. When I've sat down and read most true crime books that are about a crime, a lot of the times they're very respectful and they've very much done their research. This book, yes, she's very much done her research and trying to find out what's happened to all these things, but because it's tied to a TV show, she talks about these crimes in kind of a weird way sometimes. Sometimes it's very straightforward and feels like if I was reading a normal rehashing of a crime. Some of them, she does say things like, well, this was my favorite one, or this was, the most interesting of da-da-da-da-da, which I feel we're getting that disconnect. Just a hair. Just a hair with the disconnect. She didn't go completely off the deep end, but this is one that sometimes I felt uncomfortable reading, just because of the way she talked about the crime sometimes. And I know some of these are a bit far removed. She was talking about ones that were from the 80s and 90s sometimes that had happened. But still, I've already gone into great detail in that one video about the collectors of murder memorabilia, that true crime has a very, very messy area in it, that we're dealing with real things, real tragedies, and people also sort of look at it as entertainment. And there's a murky territory that everybody has to be really, really careful about. And I know I sound like I'm preaching as somebody who is interested in true crime and does read a lot of true crime. That sounds like I'm being hypocritical. But in this situation, I do think it is such a murky... I think you can enjoy true crime without bungling your way into tastelessness. And sometimes with this book, it does border a little bit on tastelessness just because of how it's worded. And it's once again the thing that people are forgetting. There are real people involved, real people whose lives were ruined and whose lives have been irrevocably changed because of somebody's desire to get something or get rid of someone or do something terrible. So this book, I find it a little bit difficult to recommend on that end if I'm going with my whole feelings about true crime and the fact that it should not be addressed like exploitation. There is a touch of that to this. So if I was recommending a true crime book or a true crime compilation of different things, this would not be the one. It's the first time I've run into a compilation like this, and you've seen me do lots of true crime, different ones, the True Crime Love Kills and stuff like that. This one is a little more voyeuristic and a little more like they're looking at it as entertainment than some of the other ones that just sort of relate it as a sort of encyclopedia situation and just relate facts and different things. The objectivity is lost in this one a bit, and that's why I can't really recommend it based on my true crime experiences and reading and my penchant for true crime of what I find acceptable or not. And that's just me, but there is a distinctly different flavor to this one than some of the other ones that I have read.